I would say that my son was a nightmare. His behavior was a nightmare. School was a nightmare. And I would say after we started treating, the clouds started to lift, the sun started to shine, and I could really see my son reemerging. The little boy that I once knew, that that I loved and that I knew. And my son was definitely a joy to be around, and he was a pleasure. He is my only son. He's my only child. And I do live for him. And he was always he was a joy to be around. He had a very spirited personality. I would say it was rather robust at times. But he was a joy to be around. And it was brought from a nightmare situation to a situation where I have a very loving child, again, a warm child, just a pleasure to be around. And that my heart is full. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful. And I always tried to remain and hold on to that faith that I could find a way to bring him back to a state of health. And now I just have a beautiful 14-year-old boy who is, for the most part, many times wonderful to be around. However, again, he is 14, and we do know that the hormones are there. And, he's a typical 14-year-old boy. He's typical. So I will handle those little bumps, little speed bumps along the way, but there are no major catastrophes, to say the least. So he's gone from nightmare to, for the most part, a pleasure to be around. And I am eternally grateful for that. I really am. And that is spoken from the heart. It is.
BioNexus Health Podcast, where we explore and share information and stories about recovering and healing from chronic and environmental illnesses such as mold biotoxin illness, Lyme disease, autism spectrum disorder, fatigue, Crohn's and colitis, mast cell activation syndrome, PANS, and more. Please help us grow our message by subscribing to our podcast channel and sharing the podcast on your social networks. For more information, visit bionexushealth.com.
Information within this video, audio, or text, collectively known as the podcast, has not been reviewed by the FDA. Nothing within the podcast is intended as or should be construed as medical advice. Information is for general informational and educational purposes only. Consumers of the podcast should consult with their healthcare practitioners for medical recommendations. Seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider. Do not disregard the advice of a healthcare provider based on any information from the podcast. The information within the podcast may contain information concerning dietary supplements or over-the-counter products that are not drugs. Our dietary supplement products are not intended for use as a means to cure, treat, prevent, diagnose, or mitigate any disease or other medical or abnormal condition.